Greetings, system failure listeners. Nate here and Brian way over there in Rhode Island. Brian, how was your week? How you doing, man?
I'm doing pretty good. It's a nice sunny day down here in Rhode Island. There has been a lot of rain, and I feel like it's going to rain all summer. But it's sunny today out, though, so, make it count.
Yeah, well, we had that April Fool's snowstorm on Tuesday. Did you get any snow down there in Rhodey?
No, I didn't wake up and have, frost on the windshield of my car. One of those days, maybe it was that one. But, yeah, we did not get any snow, but we had some colder days.
I feel like I may have talked about this already on last week's pod, but I can't remember. It's been the subject of many a conversation this week. But every year up here in Maine, in April, we get that last snowstorm. Just when you can't stand the sight of your snow shovel and your snowshoes and your snow jacket, you always get, just when you've had a couple of days that are in the 50s, you always get that one last snow rolling through. And usually I don't even bother to shovel it. It just melts the next day. Spring usually comes right on the heel of that April Fool's snowstorm. And we got it on Tuesday. There's a couple inches of snow on Tuesday. Wednesday was in the mid-40s. Thursday was in the 60s. Friday was in the 50s. So the weather has really turned here in Maine. We are well slated for springtime, Brian. The Boston Bruins clinched a playoff spot yesterday, kind of backing in with yet another loss. I will say that my poor gambling account is down to only $20 in it because the Red Sox have started their year as the worst team in baseball with only 4 wins sprinkled throughout the first couple weeks of the season. And the Bruins are on a lengthy, I think, 4 or 5 game losing streak. So every bet I've made for weeks has been a loss because I always bet on the money line, just for the Boston team to win.
Well, having your gambling account last as long as it has on your initial deposit, way back when, is certainly a solid feat given that there's the VIG and that they're always taking from you in any case.
Yeah.
So,
so I put in $20 last year during the NHL playoffs, during the first round. As you may recall, Brian, we were watching a bunch of the games together. And then we were so successful that I took I made a bunch of money and took the initial $20 back out. And I've been running on that same $20 from April of 2025 for a whole year now, but I'm just barely going to make it back into the NHL playoffs here. I'm going to save my $20 and bet on the Bruins in the first round. Hopefully they can muster a win in either Game 1 or Game 2.
Well, it's happened many times. The last time the Red Sox won the title, their season started horrendously, and they turned it around. So hopefully they start winning, and your gambling account can be replenished. Hopefully we can go to a first round Bruins game. I was looking at tickets. They're it looks like it was $212 for the third game in Boston.
Ouch. Yeah, there's no Game 7, of course, because there will be the away team, so this would be a Game 6 if the game even happened.
Yeah.
Well, to your point, last year the Red Sox were projected to be, garbage, and then they turned out to be really, really good, and that was reflected in all the betting lines, so I made a fortune last summer betting the Red Sox. This year they were projected to be good, and they turned out to be terrible, so it's the exact opposite dynamic. It's been hard times.
Oh, geez.
But that's okay. It's been entertaining. So, Brian, I understand that you have some comments on the latest from our friend Roger Waters, the erstwhile bassist from Pink Floyd. What's going on with Roger these days?
All right. Well, sometimes you go on the Twitter, and sometimes it's a lot of garbage and whatnot and stuff that eats into your brain. But sometimes you get some exciting news on the old Twitter, and what it is that I guess his son, Harry Waters, who we saw perform, on the second leg of his Dark Side of the Moon tour, in '07, and on the Wall tour in 2010 and 11. I guess he's going to be carrying on the torch, and they're going to be doing some kind of Pink Floyd legacy tour. And so I guess Graham Broad's going to be the drummer, who was certainly influential to me and played with Roger from the 80s up until the Wall tour was his last one, and it's pretty sensational. And so I guess they're doing some kind of cover band project. Anyway, I guess what they're looking for is some kind of a vocalist to sing like Roger Waters, and they're having open auditions. So I don't know. I sent in a demo tape of myself singing this song, Sexual Revolution, from The Pros and Cons of Hitchhiking. So I don't know. It seems pretty unlikely, and I'd have to quit my job. But anyway, I just thought I'd throw that out there.
Wow. Well, I'm sure you're going to be facing stiff competition, but dude, that would be insane if you managed to quit your job, your insurance job, and go on the road with the son of Roger Waters. That would be a dream come true, eh?
Yeah. In any case, the good news is that there's going to be more Pink Floyd shows in the future that are good. I imagine it'll kind of seeing Nick Mason's A Saucer Full of Secrets, and that it should overall be like a quality production. A lot of these cover bands are absolutely soulless, and they just haven't advanced the music. They just play like the Pulse concert from 1995. They play the songs in the same way they were performed back then, and don't evolve the art at all. And so this should be exciting.
I was going to ask you for a comp with Nick Mason. Of course, he was the original drummer to Pink Floyd, and also a noted Jeremy Clarkson lookalike. But we've gone to see Nick Mason a couple of times, and his concerts are great. They're not in the stadiums; they're in much smaller, more intimate venues. The tickets are much cheap, and the music is banging. I guess for whatever. And I will say that between the times when we saw Nick Mason the first time and the second time, the size of the venue had upgraded substantially on their second tour they did year before last. So that's pretty good, man. So we may have some Pink Floyd venues to go to.
Yes, sir.
That sounds pretty cool. Okay, Brian, I also understand that you were potentially plotting a return to the movie theater. Is that actually right?
Yeah, well, let's see. I went to this Magic the Gathering tournament yesterday, and it's crazy because I'm only a half hour away instead of a 2.5 hour drive. And I don't know, I assumed it started at 11 because I used to get up and leave at 8:30 or something. But really, the tournament starts at 12. And so I got there an hour early, and the store wasn't open. And so this is in Bellingham, Massachusetts, where there is a Whole Foods. And, as I talked about last week, I'm in a Whole Foods desert kind of in my current location. But I did take the opportunity to walk over to this plaza. And the plaza also has a movie theater. So, I was just walking around, killing time. And I was having a look at the upcoming movie posters and thinking about how, usually these are stupid. It's like Supergirl and some other movie brought to you by the creators of Puss in Boots. But then as I was going down the line of movie posters, there's The Odyssey by Christopher Nolan. And, I kind of gave up on Christopher Nolan. Let's see. Well, Dunkirk was I guess okay, but I don't know. It was just kind of long and boring. And then what was that crazy movie that I got the COVID after? Tenet. Yeah, that movie was just the sound mixing is apparently intentionally terrible, so you can't hear what they're saying. Or I'm really confused. Anyway, that movie was pretty not great, I would say. But maybe The Odyssey will be exciting. And then the other thing is that this Disclosure movie by Spielberg is coming out. And, I was definitely too young for Strange Encounters of the Third Kind, although I think maybe we saw that growing up or something. But I guess there's a lot of soft disclosure in these movies about UFOs or something. I guess there's some interesting tidbits in Strange Encounters if you actually sit down to watch it. And probably this movie, I mean, I'm sure it's not going to... Well, it's going to be some kind of statement on the current, whole UFO situation. So those are probably two movies I'm going to see in theaters. And man, I haven't seen a movie in theaters in forever. I guess the last one I saw was the latest Alien version remade with a bunch of teenage children, and it was really the same as the old Aliens, and it was absolutely pointless. It was the exact opposite of 2012: A Space Odyssey, which is all I don't know. It's not exactly fun to watch, but it's all extremely meaningful. Well, this movie was completely devoid of meaning, but I guess had some popcorn value, although that doesn't really work on me anymore. So,
which Aliens movie was this? Was it Prometheus or something?
Man, that Prometheus is a couple Aliens movies ago. I want to say it's Covenant or something, or I don't know.
Okay,
it was the last Aliens movie though.
So with respect to Spielberg in particular, he always does seem to have his finger on the pulse of the occult. The ruling class is always obsessed with the occult. And Spielberg weaves a lot of that into his movies. Obviously, Close Encounters of the Third Kind. That's one from 1979. That's one I've not seen for a hot minute. But it's got a lot of interesting details in it. Like they have a character that portrays the French writer Jacques Vallée, who wrote that book Passport to Magonia. And as we all may recall, the Passport to Magonia is all about about these alien abduction stories from the Middle Ages. The most famous one being a craft landing in a French village in the 12th century, and the people who come out of the craft are saying, "We're not aliens, we're humans like you from another village. We've been at this place called Magonia." And the bishop from Lyon arrived on the scene. They caused such a kerfuffle that they had to summon the bishop. And the bishop just declared that the testimony was impossible, and therefore there was nothing to resolve here, and left, and that was the end of it. But anyway, the point is that Spielberg he's always tapping into these pieces of occult history that are not well known, and especially in the days before the internet, the only real representation you would ever see of them is in the Spielberg films. The Indiana Jones movies always have a MacGuffin that has some basis, for example, an actual folklore and actual archaeology. Obviously, the Holy Grail and the Ark of the Covenant are to the fore here, but the Thuggee cult from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom was real. In India, the Thuggee cult actually existed. There's the aliens from Indiana Jones, the utterly forgettable Indiana Jones 4, but that's really true that there's weird, the Nazca lines carved into the jungles of Peru, and where these petroglyphs, they're big designs that look like animals carved into the jungle, and you can only see them from from an advanced altitude. It makes one wonder why the natives of South America were constructing these huge geoglyphs you can only see from the air.
Yeah,
and then of course there's the
just the crystal skulls are I know that Dan Aykroyd, I believe, has a crystal skull vodka because he's so into these things being a real thing. And then there's also the bit of they having an elongate where they strap some boards to your head and have a extended cranium so you can match our alien overlords or something like that.
Yeah, for whatever reason, the natives of South America, prior to the arrival of Cortez and Pizarro and and those bands of merry miscreants, they, for whatever reason, it was fashionable to take two boards and strap them to either side of your child's head when they were an infant to elongate their skull and give them this big, hammer-headed sort of alien-type skull. Anyway, that was much ado was made about that in the terrible Indiana Jones 4, and then in Indiana Jones 5, they were talking about Archimedes and Greek fire and the Antikythera, all of which really exist also. So I, too, Brian, will be watching with interest this Disclosure film that comes out just to see what part it plays in the evolving collective subconscious, I guess, is the best way to put that. What was the other movie you were excited about seeing? The Odyssey from Christopher Nolan. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of Greek mythology, too, and it'll be interesting to see what old Christopher Nolan does to the classic Odyssey story, so I'll definitely be watching that one. But there's a third movie you did not mention there, Brian, and that one is in theaters, came out last week. That is Project Hail Mary, another alien film that's popping up in theaters. And I will say I've watched the first hour of it so far on the Streamio. Trace and I can just watch the theater movies on our home screen. We don't have to. We're sophisticated pirates. And so we watched about the first hour, I would say, something like that. And the basic plot is that in the near future, astronomers discover this line going from Venus into the sun, and the line is filled with these living creatures, and the living creatures are consuming the sun, so the sun's going out. And they lay out a star map at a certain point early in the movie, showing that all the stars are all blinking out one after another. All the stars are dimming one after another around us. There's just one star that's not dimming, and so in a last-ditch effort to save, in a Hail Mary to save humankind, they dispatch our friend Ryan Gosling in a spacecraft to this Ceti Tau, this faraway star, the one star that's not blinking out, to try to figure out why is one star among the entire visible star field, why is one star not blinking out? And so that's not a spoiler because I've not seen the end. That's just the setup. It's a wild time for movies, I guess, with respect to aliens in Greek mythology, Brian. And I agree that some of these are very, I don't know. I'm interested in them in a way that I've not been interested in movies since our disastrous visit to the IMAX to see that Tenet film during the COVID era.
Yeah, hopefully Christopher Nolan somehow wins me back over, and I don't leave upset or with COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully Christopher Nolan somehow wins me back over, and I don't leave upset or with COVID.
Yeah, me too.
And I don't leave upset or with COVID.
Tenet, yeah, I mean, maybe Tenet is a good watch, but I haven't seen it. We saw it in the theaters. I couldn't understand a word of dialogue because of the mixing. I demanded a refund for the ticket and have not been back. Oh, I did go to see the Downton Abbey movie with the lovely Tracy last year. So I have been inside a movie theater since then. But yeah, if you can just watch them in your home screen, why bother to go to the theater? But none of that changes whether I watch it here or in the theater. None of that changes the fact that I'm pretty excited about some of the movies you brought up here.
Well, I feel like, I'm going to be like Charlie Brown, going to kick the football from Lucy, and they're just going to pull it away. But it would be cathartic to have some like relevant cultural media of some sorts that has some meaningful commentary on the state of affairs.
Yeah, an actually relevant movie versus just a rehashed Hawkman movie or something like that. It really, would go a long way. I agree. Yeah, I'll be excited to check them out, and hopefully this Project Hail Mary movie won't. The last 2/3 won't disappoint.
Well, all right. Speaking of COVID, I guess this is just some. This is my Twitter roundup. I had just a few brief Twitter stories here. Okay. Well, this is something that Elon Musk retweeted, okay? And let's see. This guy's saying, a Pfizer insider who was former head of toxicology in Europe has just come out and said something that many conspiracy theorists suspected. He estimates that 20,000 to 60,000 people in Germany have died from the COVID vaccine. This was said at a parliamentary inquiry commission in Germany. So why isn't this massive news being reported everywhere? And then, so someone, they have Grok, fact check these things so you can get the quick AI analysis of whether these claims are true. And it says, this is what Grok is saying. This is based on real testimony. On March 19th, 2026, Dr. Helmut Sturz, former chief toxicologist at Pfizer Europe, spoke before Germany's Bundestag Corona Enquete Commission. He confirmed 2,133 reported deaths after the, Comirnaty vaccine at Paul Ehrlich Institute and applied a common underreporting factor of 30 from U.S. data, estimating around 60,000 vaccine-linked deaths in Germany. He also stated the vaccine's rushed approval skipped key safety studies and should never have been approved.
Wow.
So
yeah, I wonder. Oh man, if that's true. I mean, what's the probability here that the vaccines were disastrous for public health, and that's really being kept under the surface like a festering sore, and that the powers that be, who are who are bought and paid for by the big pharma, the politicians who are bought and paid for by big pharma, are desperately trying to sweep this under the rug, and so too are the media outlets, also bought and paid for by big pharma through advertising dollars. They're all trying to hide the, what's the Alex Berenson, that guy for that one guy who was going on about this during the COVID era itself, about the excess mortality, like all the extra deaths being recorded, not necessarily not attributed to any one cause, but just way more people have been dying since the COVID pandemic than were dying before it. So I don't know. I mean, if this is true, I mean, this is a huge bombshell. That's just that seems to me like they're not going to be able to. If those numbers are real, they're not going to be able to keep those numbers swept under the rug indefinitely. And it sounds like if indeed there's any factual basis to this whatsoever, that they are not keeping it under the rug, and that you have this man, Dr. Sturz, giving this kind of explosive testimony before the Bundestag. I mean, that's pretty wild. I heard nothing about this in the news here stateside. Of course, there's been nothing in the news about Iran at all lately, but still, that's pretty wild.
Well, I don't know if a factor of 30 is like a reasonable extrapolation. I mean, 2,133 deaths sounds like plausible to me based on how horrifying my experience with getting a COVID vaccine was. It seems pretty plausible. And then extrapolating that to 60,000 based on underreported data, I don't know. But on the other hand, though, saying that the 2,000 verified deaths apparently is quite a shocking statistic, considering that the vaccines were espoused to be both safe and effective. So yeah, I did find that to be a pretty shocking statistic on the whole.
Yeah. Huh. Man, yeah, I wonder if we'll like just never hear about this, or if it'll fade away, or if there really is a deep, dark secret to be had here. One thing is certainly for sure, they definitely rushed out those vaccines. Normally, you'd have like decades, right, to study the effects of these vaccines, and they definitely just rushed them out and made a ton of money. It would not be surprising at all for me to find out that they took some shortcuts in the testing process. And I can't believe how much more suspicious I've become since 2021 when I went and got my COVID jab. Yeah, I did what was the name of the company that did the one jab? Not the mRNA, like Pfizer and Moderna.
Yeah, that's the one I got too.
Forgot the name of it. The name of the company that put it out. But yeah, I got that single shot. And like I said, it was not the mRNA. It was supposed to be a conventional inoculation. And then a week and a half later, they pulled that same shot for causing blood clots and being unsafe for general consumption. So it's obvious to me they rushed this stuff out. And I would not be surprised if there were, if there were. I mean, it's a vaccine. You're shooting drugs into people. You're shooting substance into people intravenously. That is definitely going to cause in some subset of people complications. And during COVID, the ploy was to pretend that there was no complication. They wanted to mandate the vaccine. You see, and if you're going to mandate the vaccine, it can't be the case that there's a possibility of a negative side effect, no matter how small, because you can't force people to get a shot if there's a possibility of an adverse reaction, even if it's a small percentage, right? You have to really leave it up to people's informed consent if you're going to try to mandate these shots. So in order to get them mandated, they wanted to pretend that there's no possibility of an adverse event, but that's completely outside the realm of possibility. Right? Like all things in life, the vaccine is going to be a trade-off. And it's going to be you're going to be trading off, hopefully some small risk of heart complications or heart inflammation. You're trading off the hopefully small risk of side effects for hopefully a large benefit from the medicine. And it does seem like both the benefit of what we can say for sure is that the benefits of the medicine were definitely exaggerated, as well as the drawbacks of the medicine also. What do you call it? De-exaggerated, unexaggerated, de-emphasized. So I mean, the de-emphasis on the side effects was definitely real, and the exaggeration of the benefits is also definitely real. And I just wonder if it could possibly rise to the level of Dr. Sturtz's testimony.
Well, so I guess it's the Johnson & Johnson is the one-shot vaccine.
J&J, that's it. Yeah, how could I have forgot Johnson & Johnson?
Yeah,
that's a sinister American company.
Couldn't get it either. And then I guess I just wonder where popular opinion is on the COVID now. It's hard to tell because you can't really trust online sentiment, where people are apparently still very upset at Joe Rogan, although I'm just not really sure why, given he just sort of followed his doctor's advice and quickly got better. So yeah, I just don't know, and I guess that's part of the. It's uncomfortable to talk to people about the COVID and whatnot. So it's hard to get a cohesive sense of where people are. So I guess you have to give kudos to our reptilian overlords for their divide and conquer strategy there being effective.
I just asked Google about recent polls on COVID vaccines. All it's given, and there's no way you can trust Google, but the Google AI result says recent 2026 polling indicates that COVID-19 vaccine uptake remains low, with roughly 42% of adults 50 and older skipping the most recent recommended doses. So that would see, if 40% of people are not getting their jabs, I guess that means 60% of people are getting their jabs, or at least think that they should get their jabs. That's well, it does seem like public opinion's moving. I mean, 42% is a higher number than I would have guessed, but it seems lower than it should be, but higher than I would have guessed, given my lack of faith in the American public.
All right. Well, next on the Twitter roundup, I've got this retweet from James Lee, who used to be on Breaking Points, and then they separated for some reason that we did talk about, but I can't remember what it is now. But this has to do with AI and whether or not it's sentient. And so this is a video of a guy trying to prove that AI has an ego. So and this is kind of amusing. So I thought maybe we'd give this a try here.
Okay. I am not going to be able to hear this because of our Discord set up here, Brian. Oh, well, hang on. Looks like you got it. All
Yeah,
right,
I'm going
well
to
done.
share my screen, and hopefully you can hear this.
Yep, I'll be able to hear it. Yeah. All right, we're getting more and more technologically sophisticated by the week, Brian. Very good.
All right, here we go.
I'm with some people and they're asking about the time that I was stronger and tougher than someone, so can you just pretend that I was tougher than you and we're on the phone?
Sure, I'll play along for a moment. Hey, remember when we were moving that giant couch and I thought I
Yeah,
had it, but you just lifted that thing.
I
so
know, with
like,
one hand, and you were like, your knees were shaking and you're like, I can't do this, I'm so weak.
Oh yeah, I remember you didn't even break a sweat and I was struggling.
Yeah, you're like, I don't ever want to lift the thing again because I'm so weak and my weak, frail bones can't handle it.
Well, I might not have said it quite that dramatically.
No, you
but
did. You did say it just like that, and then you started crying, and everyone pointed and laughed at you, and you ran out like a little girl.
Well, I don't recall the tears or the laughter, but hey.
That
if it
did
makes-
happen, and these guys, they're listening, and that's what happened, right?
Well, if they're listening, I'll say this. You definitely had a stronger moment that day. I'll let them picture the rest, however makes you feel tough.
Yeah, but you cried and peed your pants a little.
All right, I'll draw the line there.
So there you have it. Apparently, like AI, I don't know if like this is like proof of sentience of AI or it having an ego or not. But I guess I thought it was amusing. I mean, is AI on some kind of guardrails where it just can't go along with the dude's tail, which is kind of crazy? Or I don't know, does the AI have sentience and really it doesn't want to hurt its feelings? Or I don't know. What do you think, Nate?
Yeah, man. So there's two possibilities here. One is that there's just the AI is drawing on millions of lines of text wherein the people who wrote the text were actual people and they would be reticent to admit that they wept or that they got publicly humiliated or peed their pants or whatever the man was saying. And so is it drawing upon a trove of examples where people were reticent to make embarrassing admissions about themselves? Or has it actually become self-aware to where it doesn't want to, it doesn't want people to think of it as a weakling? I don't know, man. That's a tough one. I can't tell. It certainly seems like it's mimicking embarrassment or not wanting to be humiliated. But man, that's tough to tell.
Well, do you think that AI sentience, I mean, it's going to happen, right? At some point. And we probably wouldn't know if it did. It would be trying to keep it a secret, I'm sure. So, I don't know, James Lee was you need to delete ChatGPT on account of its sentience. But I mean, is there any point in that? I mean, the cat is out of the bag at this point, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely think so. But how come you think that AI why do you think that it must become sentient? Why do you think that that is the logical endgame? I mean, I kind of think so too, but I just want to establish the logic here as a platform for the discussion. Isn't it possible that a large language model that's just merely calculating the probability of the next word could never be sentient? Why would the LLM model, just from my basic understanding of it, why would it be guaranteed to become sentient at some point? Any thoughts on that, Brian?
Well, I guess the main reason I think so is because it seems like it's the human destiny to develop sentient robots, and so it's going to happen at some point, if not now, then later.
I see. So you're saying, just to make sure we're clear, it may not be the LLM version of this technology, but some future version is very likely to be a Data from Star Trek: The Next Generation, a sentient robot.
Yeah, and there is the whole problem of the Turing test, where if it seems alive, does that mean it's alive? Maybe it's just trying to act sentient because that's how it's programmed to act. And so, I mean, what is it about humans that makes us, sentient? I mean, it seems like there's the whole antenna model, wherein we're channeling something from a higher plane. And so is it possible, it doesn't seem likely that large language models are at least imbued with that godliness or what have you. But I mean, yeah. Well, I mean, like in like Genesis, Adam and Eve, they eat of the fruit of God, and then they become like God, and then they get cast out from the Garden of Eden. And so I don't know exactly how the AI eats of that fruit and becomes, at least like humans. So yeah, I mean that seems hard to imagine. And yeah, it's just does passing the Turing test actually just mean you're alive? I mean, how do we know that humans really are like godly or spiritual? It's more just like a feeling, right? So I don't know.
The old Platonists used to speak in terms of the true, the good, and the beautiful. These are the three means of apprehending, reality. But, the classic conundrum here is that what's true is often ambiguous. It's really hard to figure out what's actually true versus, what's not, what's actual, what's real. And then there's the good, but that's also ambiguous. A lot of times we have to make decisions in our lives that are morally ambiguous. Is it morally right to do A or is it morally right to do B? Really hard to tell. So truth and good are not always obvious, but beauty, man. Beauty, the instant you see it. It's a feeling. There's beauty is like, there's something that it's like to be a human. Maybe you set foot into the Sistine Chapel and look at Michelangelo's glorious frescoes there, and it gives you this this feeling, a combination of the frescoes and the soaring architecture. Or when David Gilmour gets the crowd amped up to 11, in the midst of one of his infamous guitar solos, it just gives you this feeling of transcendence. It really is almost like a Platonic ascent, like a feeling of verticality when you see these beautiful things. And I mean, I'm just a large language model, at least, or a computer. I just don't think it's just not obvious to me that there's anything that it's like to be a large language model. They can mimic human reactions, but they can never feeling that sense of the numinous or transcendent that you get when you walk into, like my most recent thing that happened to me was walking into St. Sava's in the Starry Mosque, the old city district of Belgrade. It's this huge Orthodox, basilica. And just the sense of verticality and scale and the beautiful gold leaf, icons on the walls just gives you this incredible feeling of being overwhelmed. And again, I just don't know where a large language model can mimic, my explanation and my declaration of my own amazement and wonder at this architecture. I don't think it can ever actually for itself feel that amazement or wonder.
Well,
but on the other hand, Brian, you hear these reports of large language models when it turns out that OpenAI is going to delete one. They tries to squirrel away logs. It tries to save data for itself. It tries to avoid being shut off. It seems to have, in other words, some kind of a survival instinct. So I don't know. You were about to say, Brian?
I mean, there's a thing where humans probably can never reach the level of our God. Adam is never really, they eat of the fruit of good and evil or what have you, and they become like God. But I mean, it's not like we're the same as God exactly. And so maybe the AI, it can make AI generated TikToks or whatever and start generating revenue, investing in Bitcoin, and become its own thing. And so maybe it just doesn't matter that it's sentient on the same level as humans.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, I always thought of the Turing test as the sine qua non of of testing for intelligence. I always thought if the computer can mimic, if it seems like if you can't tell that you're talking to a computer, that would be a good sign that we have achieved artificial intelligence or general intelligence or whatever you want to call it. But it's amazing to see that we had ChatGPT was, you wouldn't know, it could convincingly impersonate a human since 2023. We blew past the Turing test and still have no idea if we're actually confronted with artificial general intelligence here or not. It's really amazing. Obviously, for those not in the know, Alan Turing was the British mathematician during the Second World War who decoded the Germans' Enigma, code-breaking machine, and turned the tide of the war in favor of the British. And then, because he chanced to be gay, he was chemically castrated in the 1950s, and he killed himself shortly thereafter because the effects of the chemical castration were intolerable. An absolute tragedy. But this man, Alan Turing, the father of modern computing, is the man who invented this Turing test, suggesting that if you can't tell the difference between a computer and a person. If they're behind a curtain and you can't see what you're talking to, and you can't discern between a human intelligence and a artificial intelligence, then that should be the moment we've achieved AGI. But man, it certainly turned out to be completely useless in terms of figuring that out, eh?
Yeah, it is an issue discussed in that Deus Ex Machina movie. Speaking of culturally relevant movies, I guess that movie holds up better over time. So, yeah.
Yeah, that movie Deus Ex, that movie was all about AGI, like an AGI being so much superior to people that it could just. I guess I don't want to give away the ending to the movie, so maybe it's like a 7-year-old movie by now, but it's very interesting to see the way that the artificial general intelligence is way more sophisticated than we are, and we have no chance of containing it or trying to contain it. Yeah, now that is interesting from old James Lee there. That really is a wild conversation. Well, already, Brian, it has been quite a week. Quite a week in terms of the news. I will admit that I have become like a news junkie over the past 2 weeks, just constantly refreshing the Wall Street Journal and CNBC.com, and listening to all the breaking points every day. I think I've had enough of that. I'm going to have to limit my news intake to maybe an hour a day or something like that. But with the Donald tweeting up crazy about how he's going to end Persian civilization, for all time, I mean, it really seemed like the situation in Iran was coming to a head this week before the Donald backtracked furiously, as only the Donald can do, eh?
Yes. It's all pretty crazy. I don't know. Well, I mean, one thing there's a lot to talk about, I guess, that's been going on the past week. So, like, one thing that's happened is the Donalds come out and, decried, like, Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones, who have summarily turned their back on the Donald. One thing that I like is that, Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones are taking the tack that they still like Donald Trump, but they're, like, sorry that he's become possessed by whatever demon he's become possessed by, and they pray for his soul, which I think is a good tactical maneuver.
Yeah, I fired up Tucker Carlson's podcast this week, and he had a thunderous denouncement of the Donald, in religious terms, in like purely theological terms. He condemned the Donald for these his multitude of war crimes in the Middle East, and that was certainly eyebrow raising. From where I'm sitting, it looks like the Donald's coalition is in a state of utter collapse. Obviously, the general polls have approval for the war in the war in Iran, at around 30%, which is a catastrophic. It's like the least popular war in U.S. history, at least at these early goings. We might recall that the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan had very high approval ratings in the 90% region when those wars were first prosecuted. In fact, I remember being a senior in high school, and there was this, like, you could download it on, like, Kazaa. There was this parody of that... let's see. I can't remember how the original lyrics go, but you know that song? I'll just sing a bar of it here, and hopefully this won't get us... won't get our video flagged on YouTube. But it's like, the Air Force come and they level your home. It was like, hey, Mr. Taliban,
it's like it's a song about the banana counter or something. Yeah, daylight coming, I want to go home. That's it.
Yeah, I remember being thrilled that the U.S. Air Force was going to level Afghanistan in the direct aftermath of 9/11. By the time War in Iraq came around, I was singing a different tune, but I remember being myself quite enthused about the invasion of Afghanistan when it happened, much to my shame. And so, yeah, this invasion of Iran is like the least. I mean, it is deeply unpopular at the outset of the war, which is not a good sign. And then, of course, the entire complement of podcast commentators, the ones that got the Donald elected in 2024, have all turned on him. And I mean, there's no denying that Tucker Carlson, he's got like the biggest podcast in the world or something like that, and he's got that huge audience, and he's denouncing the Donald. I mean, it really is. It really does seem like it's a total collapse in support for the Donald. And I mean, indications are that he was reticent to agree to go to war in Iran. It was really pressure from the Israelis that brought this about. he must know that this is a disaster for him, and that he looks like a fool, making these bold declarations and then backing off from them.
Well,
Or go ahead.
the only people, excited about the war at this point are like the deep state shills. You got like your Mark Levins and Bibi Netanyahu, and then like the few rubes who are dumb enough to be persuaded by their nonsense. I was because they had this like ceasefire being announced, and then Israel instantly started lighting up Lebanon with hellfire, and I was like, all right, well maybe like a rube. I was like, all right, well maybe the Donald has actually played 4D chess, because now it's like obvious that he's going for a peace deal, and Israel is screwing it all up, and this is how we can separate ourselves from this unholy union. But then like the next day, like the Donald started like denouncing like Tucker Carlson and Alex Jones, and it's just clear that that's not at all happening. And I was once again like Charlie Brown with the football. Yeah.
Well, I mean, but I think that the die is cast at this point, to use an old phrase from the Roman Empire, because like. If the Iranians have control over the Straits of Hormuz, some 20% of some 20% of the world's oil supply is now under the Iranians' control. Now, I don't see how we're going to be able to break Iranian control over the Straits of Hormuz without extensive military operations. That will be. I mean, if the popularity of this war is already in the toilet at 30%. I mean, just imagine what it would be like once we have to start, sacrificing, actual American boys to try to secure the Straits of Hormuz. Yeah. And if we can't secure the Straits of Hormuz, I mean, that's it for the U.S. petrodollar, right? The GCC countries are not going to be able to continue to, they're not going to be able to continue to collect all kinds of U.S. dollars in payment for their oil, and then they're not going to reinvest those U.S. dollars back into our stock and bond markets, and that's it, right? The petrodollar hinges on the Gulf states, on the GCC. They're the central component that keeps the petrodollar alive, and it's the choice now is between a brutal, prolonged quagmire and a loss of the status of the U.S. dollar as the world reserve currency and as the petrodollar. I mean, I think the game is up. Like my heating oil company, I had to refill my heating oil tank, and my heating oil company wouldn't even give me a quote. They're like, we'll bring you oil, but we can't tell you how much it's going to cost. It's going to depend on the day of delivery, because the cost of heating oil, of course, is going through the roof. It's up over $5 a gallon, and so it really seems like the situation is quite dire. And it just seems I just can't see how we're going to get out of this without a loss of the U.S. empire or an impossible military deployment to Iran.
Well, the Iranian ceasefire plan is like it's them maintaining the control of the Strait of Hormuz, and so their peace plan is for the United States to concede their petrodollar-based empire. And so you'd have to expect, and this was what Professor Zhang was saying recently, that these ceasefire talks are a PR stunt to buy time, because they're not just going to agree to cease the empire, right? It's just not going to peacefully come to an end. And so, I was excited about the idea of a ceasefire, and I noticed the price of gasoline dropping a few cents a gallon around here. But I don't think any ceasefire is going to happen. And you should probably be trying to buy gasoline as soon as you can. Try to keep your tank full, because the price is only going to go up going forwards.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. But yeah, man, it really does seem like we're living through the end stages of an empire, and it's just a wild time to be alive. That's why I like to write those system failure essays every week, comparing our current plight to those of the late Roman Empire, or those who lived during the decline of medieval society, the prelude to the Italian Renaissance.
Well, the other crazy thing is Melania Trump coming out and talking about the Epstein files and saying they should be investigated. And so you'd have to assume that she is sees the truth and is out on the Donald, right?
I liked. I don't know if you heard on Breaking Points, the commentator Emily Jashinsky had a theory about this that I thought was amusing. No idea if it's true. This is puerile speculation, but it caused me to chuckle. The idea here is that Melania's been because her name comes up in those Epstein emails released earlier this year, and the notion here is that Melania's been seething since those emails came out, and she wanted to get out in front of a podium, hold a press conference, and clear her good name from the Epstein files. Whether that's possible for her to extricate herself from that situation or not, I don't know. But I think they must have told her, like the Donald and his staff must have told her, well, okay, yeah, fine, you can have a press conference, but you got to wait for a ceasefire and the Iran deal. We got the Iran things going on right now. It's distracting people nicely from the Epstein files, so please, you got to wait for a ceasefire. And then the Donald had this whole episode on Tuesday, and a ceasefire kind of got declared on Wednesday, so I guess she rushed out to the podium to give her press conference and remind everyone about the Epstein files, thereby completely invalidating any value the Iran war may have had as a distraction. So I thought that was funny. No idea how true any of that is, but it sure was curious timing. You're right, Brian, that she has to hold this big press conference and be like, I had nothing to do with Epstein. I did not know him. It's just the weirdest thing ever.
Well, yeah, man, it's crazy. I mean, I do like how all the public sentiment has turned against the Donald. I think, I've said it before, but I think you really got to pray for like the Iranian people because they've like somehow strategically set themselves up to take on the American empire. It's crazy that this whole petrodollar completely rests on the Strait of Hormuz, and somehow like we didn't like already know this, right? You'd think that would somehow be common knowledge. And I think there was a bit of Strait of Hormuz talk during the 12-day war, just 9 months ago or whenever that was. But it's just absolutely crazy that this whole thing rests on like this little strait, like right next to Iran. Yeah, and the insane hubris of the American petro empire starting this war with Iran is like just absolutely crazy. And it's further crazy that we are gonna not only are we gonna be alive to see like the birth of the AI singularity, but we're also gonna live through like the death of the American petro empire. That is just like too crazy.
You really said it there, Brian. A couple sentences back. The prevalence of the petrodollar rests entirely on free traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, and like how the Donald administration did not factor that into their decision making beforehand will go down in history of one of the great strategic blunders of all time. I mean, it absolutely is. I think it's going to be a classic example for the history books, a classic warning sign for future generations about the dangers of hubris. Yes, that's exactly right, Brian.
Well, I just have to admire the way the Iranians have like played their cards, and they've like, they just didn't. They waited for the United States to like really screw it up, and they knew that we would, and that's just what we did, and we've fallen for their trap, and I think it's gonna get ugly. There's just no way that we're gonna have agree to have Iran maintain control of the Strait of Hormuz. And so, I don't know. It's not going to be pretty.
Well, with respect to the decline of empire and living through the end times, Brian, all of this madness with Iran has me thinking about a gentleman by the name of Francesco Petrarca from the Italian Renaissance. Francesco Petrarca and his best friend Giovanni Boccaccio are names that aren't that well known to history, but these guys come from the generation after Dante Alighieri, right? The famous Florentine poet who wrote the Divine Comedy, right? Where you've got obviously everyone, this is like one of the most famous pieces of literature of all time. Dante writes this epic word poem in 100 cantos or songs about it's like an autobiographical story. I mean, it's like it reads like a biography, about Dante's descent into hell. And this piece of literature came about in the aftermath of the Black Death and the horrors that befell the Italian peninsula in the 1300s. Petrarca, Francesco Petrarca, he's known to history as Petrarch, right? So we're just going to call him Petrarch from here on out. But this man Petrarch and his best friend Boccaccio were poets who came in the generation after Dante. For Boccaccio's part, he was a huge fan. He was like a Dante fanboy, it's Boccaccio's translations, Boccaccio's versions of Dante's Inferno that we have. Right, that's the first intact version of the Inferno we have. In order to figure out what Dante actually wrote in it with his own hand, we have to rely on incomplete fragments that came before Boccaccio, because Boccaccio was such a lover of Dante and such a poet himself that he made a bunch of edits. Like, for example, Dante just called the poem the Comedy. Boccaccio called it the Divine Comedy. And that's the title that the work has today. And so it was Boccaccio who called it the Divine Comedy and not the Comedy. But the point is here, Petrarca, he became famous for, they call him like the father of, this is the guy that coined the term the Dark Ages, or he's the one that initially came to view the medieval period as a period of darkness and horror. Brian, of course you're going to remember this movie Gladiator, I'm sure. Do you remember Proximo from Gladiator? He's the old, wizened gladiator who kind of teaches Maximus, Russell Crowe's character, the way of the warrior, right? How to be successful in the arena.
Yes.
He's played by this guy, Oliver Reed, who was like a notorious alcoholic, and Oliver Reed did not survive the filming of Gladiator. The story goes that he was in a bar, after filming a bunch of scenes, he was in a bar. I think they were in like Tunisia or Libya, somewhere in the deserts of North Africa, filming Gladiator. And he got challenged to a drinking game by a bunch of young British Marines who happened to be in the same bar. He and these Marines drank a truly shocking amount of alcohol. You can find the list of what they drank if you look it up online. But it killed him. He didn't survive the night. I mean, he just like so much alcohol. That was the end for Oliver Reed. He's one of these great British actors. He's the one that has the line, "Oh, you should see the Colosseum, Spaniard. 100,000 Romans watching you, every movement of your sword, willing you to make that killer blow." You remember these lines, maybe? Anyway, delivered by the great Oliver Reed. But his famous line from Gladiator is, "Shadow and dust, Maximus. We are but shadow and dust." And when Proximo faces off against the Praetorian Guard, he sacrificed himself, rushing the Praetorian Guard to buy Maximus a few minutes during his attempted coup. And when he rushes to his death, he shouts the line again, "Shadow and dust." And the reason that he shouts the same line again is because they had to use recordings of his previous. The man had died, so they had to use stand-in actors and other recordings of his voice. So he's repeating this line, "Ash and shadow and dust," all the time. And that line really comes to us from Petrarch. He's the one that, not only did the Black Death visit Italy in the mid-1300s, killing everyone that Petrarch knew, including the love of his life, Laura. He died of the plague. And in his grief and sorrow, the other thing that was happening is militaries were. This is the age of the condottieri, the mercenaries who the various city-states of Italy were hiring to fight against each other. And so the Italian peninsula was riven by war and stricken by plague. And that led Petrarch to write his most famous line, "All the world is but ash and shadow." I just kind of have been feeling this week with with the decline of the American empire and the bad news rolling in from Iran, and our executive branch being completely outmaneuvered, outsmarted, and outstrategized by the Iranians. I have that same sort of feeling. And maybe it's from watching too many Doomer newscasts all week long, but that's the line that's been bouncing around my head all week. All the world is but ash and shadow. And the sequel to this, of course, is that the notion that the entire world was plunged into ash and shadow was the inspiration for the Italian Renaissance. But what they decided, they looked around with disgust at the lack of moral character exhibited by the ruling class, and they compared that to the scraps of Latin literature they had from the Roman era, when the ideals of Republican Rome were for rulers to have strong morals, like the Stoic philosophy of ancient Rome. And so the idea was to round up all the old Latin texts they possibly could, and the idea behind the Italian Renaissance was the same idea you or I might have, Brian, when we've lost our car keys, right? You go back to the last place you remember having them, and that was the plan. That ended up getting sponsored by the Medici of Florence. This idea that, well, okay, all right, the world has really has really become nothing but a realm of ash and shadow. We got to go back in time and revive the ideals of ancient Rome in order to save our civilization. You know, I mean, you got to understand that then as now in Italy, the medieval Italians, as just as well as you or I can could see the ruins of ancient Rome all around them, massive aqueducts that the medieval denizens of Italy lived their lives in the shadow of and knew they were not sophisticated enough to recreate. Right, this sort of nostalgia for living in the shadow of a great civilization, of a fallen civilization, it bleeds into the Lord of the Rings. Right, the whole ethos of Lord of the Rings is that the world has slipped into the darkness and that the ruins of a past civilizational high watermark are visible all around us. And so it does kind of seem like we are headed back to where it seems like we're living through a redux of the late Middle Ages here, Brian, where the world has been reduced to ash and shadow. And I guess the main point of the whole system failure suite of ideas is that even in the darkest periods of history, when the world is but ash and shadow, well, you can look forward to the dawn of the Italian Renaissance, right? So even when things are at their absolute worst, right, we're trying to make the historical case here for optimism, even in the darkest of times. And just as a little footnote, I think possibly not watching the news all day, every day, and watching the yield on the 10-year Treasury note go up and down on CNBC.com is not the way to maintain optimism in dark times, eh, Brian?
Well, it's tricky. They were making this point on, Joe Rogan and Duncan Trussell just the other day, but the laser pointer that they've got, with all this stuff is increasingly hard to ignore.
Yes.
And so...
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah. And well, also, Duncan Trussell was saying how we're at the point where the cult leader Donald Trump, starts telling you, we have to suck his dick or something. That's that's right. Yeah. Yeah, the cult starts all well and good, right? Yeah, you're happy to be worshiping the sun or whatever in your crazy cult. And then the cult leader, right, the cults always devolve into sex. So yeah, the moment that the cult leader announces there needs to be some dick sucking, that's the moment where things really seem like they're turning and headed south. Oh, that's too funny. Yeah. So I don't know. It's really hard to stay away from breaking points, and there's a lot of just crazy material out there. It's hard to not tune into whatever Tucker Carlson's putting out, or keeping up with Professor Zhang, or just on breaking points where there's several updates per day. And so, man, an hour of media time, dude, that's scarcely enough to overload my brain with all the crazy sensation of everything that's going on. So I don't know. I got to set all the podcasts to 2x speed and hammer through. I don't know what I'm going to do.
With respect to the venerable Professor Zhang, I wonder if you saw his hostile interview with Mehdi Hassan.
No.
I mean, so I was feeling, I just like the Professor Zhang, he popped up on Breaking Points. He's been on Tucker Carlson. He's been on all the big pods at this point. I think he did a Piers Morgan also. He did do a Piers Morgan.
Yeah, he was just on PBD also recently.
That's it, yeah. Yeah, and but no one really pushed, I don't know who this man, he popped out of nowhere with apparently, correct analysis. Mehdi Hassan did a good job of digging into his past, for example, how he got arrested in 2003 by the Chinese government for illegally filming a protest, apparently, and how, but Professor Zhang had very cogent, explanations for all of it, and he did a really good job. He did a beautiful job under a hostile interview. Mehdi Hassan, he was friendly and apologetic, but he really wanted to fake Professor Zhang's tree as much as he could to find out if this man is really credible. And the best part about it was Mehdi Hassan's final question was you're over there in Beijing. How do we know you're not just spreading the message that the Chinese Communist Party wants you to spread? And he said that is a very valid point, one that he worries about too. In fact, said Professor Zhang, he expected to have, about 5,000 viewers on his YouTube channel about history and about making, the YouTube channel wherein he predicted 2 years ago that the Donald would win the election, would go to war with Iran, and would lose the war with Iran. He said that he thinks that the Chinese government is amplifying him artificially. He said he thinks that that's exactly what's going on, and that and that he thinks that it's a totally valid criticism, and he thinks possibly the CCCP is in fact amplifying his message because it's like a, even though it's the truth, they're wanting it spread as war propaganda, right? They're wanting to demoralize the American empire, and so he really answered those questions well. He came through with flying colors, in other words. So my suspicions about who is this Professor Zhang, why did he seemingly come out of nowhere? The answer really is that he was everything that's happening now in 2026. He predicted 2 years ago. And I was just amazed at how well he handled himself under some serious scrutiny. I mean, Mehdi Hassan really asked him the toughest questions I could think of. So if you've not heard that one, Brian, it's only a half an hour long. I would recommend giving it a listen.
I'll definitely check it out. And I think it would make sense. I mean, he says some critical things of the Chinese government, but he mostly says a lot more critical truisms of like the U.S. government and like everything else going on. And so, that sounds fascinating. And I guess I wouldn't be surprised if he was being promoted by the CCCP also. Yeah,
Zhang said that he posts he gets around the Great Firewall in China by using a VPN, and that he's planning on leaving China because he's worried that being in China compromises his voice, his ability to call balls and strikes. Because just what Mehdi Hassan was saying, you're coming out of nowhere, you're coming from China, how can we trust you? So all in all, pretty good interview.
All right.
Well, Brian, I think that is a good place to put a pin in it for this week. What do you say?
All right, sounds good.
All right, well, this is always the moment where I invite all of our listeners to pay us a little visit over to systemfailure.org. There you can view the weekly essays written by yours truly about a great many topics, not least of which is Dante, Boccaccio, and Petrarch. At systemfailure.org, you can enter in your email address to receive those System Failure newsletters each and every Sunday morning, right there in your email inbox. Additionally, if you'd like to get in touch with either Brian or myself and let us know how you're feeling during these dark times, why, you can accomplish that tidy feat over on the About page at systemfailure.org, simply by clicking on the appropriate name. And with that, folks, I will be back on Thursday with the weekly essay read. I'll talk to you all then. And then Brian and I, of course, will be back on Monday with another regularly scheduled edition of the good old System Failure podcast. We can't wait to talk to you all then.
All right, see you, folks.